This week's incredulous installment will feature commentary from comrades Scott, Joe, and myself. For news, we have a climate-centric charcuterie, from bad radar data and violent tornadoes to the fintech waterlords commodifying that which sustains complex life on Earth, to the barren Gulf full of black gold. Then the healthcare state faces a nursing exodus, France goes apeshit, Scott ponders sports betting once more, and I present a theory primer on bureaucratic capitalism. Steel your stomach for this week's slammin' Swedish six-piece.
Please do us a favor, share this content, do us a favor, enjoy our Epoch.
If you come here, you order coffee, everybody knows you're talking about drip coffee. You order a tea here, people are like, what kind of tea? It's the exact opposite in Europe. They completely flip it. So tea, I guess maybe this is more so UK. It's English breakfast tea, or like a very light, sort of very lightly caffeinated tea. And then coffee, if you say, can I get a coffee? Like, what the fuck kind, bitch?
That's
very
how they
rude.
talk to you?
Yes.
I think this may just be an English thing.
I don't have anything clever. The only clever, I don't have anything clever. Started streaming on Twitch. We'll talk about that later, though.
I mean, it is a great
Welcome
time
back
to
to
be
the
alive.
Epoch.
Opening day is tomorrow.
Opening day is tomorrow.
Opening day for what?
You're going to become so
Baseball.
much more annoying. Joe's going to become so much more annoying on all social media. So just like heads up on that.
Can't wait.
Can't
Yeah.
say we didn't warn you.
It's going to be endless, like... What was that thing you posted yesterday about, like, the two different brother pitchers? I just thought that video was really cool because they had both their pitches at the same time. I just thought that video was cool.
Yeah, they're identical twins.
But they throw, like, different sides. It's cool. It was cool. One's left, one's right. It's cool.
Yeah, one of them's a right-handed submarine pitcher, and the other one is left-handed and throws at like more of like a 3/4 angle.
Did you say right-handed submarine?
Yeah, like they.
Oh, that's when you
It's-
throw, like, an under... Yeah, okay. I used to watch a lot of baseball.
It's like a sidearm.
The thing about that, though, is I've heard is that, like, the force sometimes can become so much that, like, you can, like, break your arm.
Well, your elbow
Yeah.
probably gets really fucked up.
Yeah, there are pretty horrendous videos of that. But we're not talking about that this week, folks. We're talking about some other things. Like the UN. What did they do?
things.
Oh, yeah, the climate report. We're fucked. Okay. This is going to get dark, so I'm just going to mute myself and just smoke so I feel better.
Yeah, instead of
Healthy.
talking about nice things like baseball, we get to talk about how the human race, its fate is sealed. We are all basically doomed.
It's
But
really
not
what
my
it says,
words.
but okay.
That is the conclusion of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that released its findings on March 20th, that we have basically until 2030, not like 2050, to cut all carbon emissions by like at least half if we are to avoid reaching the 1.5 degrees Celsius degrees of like warming above pre-industrial levels, which is basically like the point of no return, at which the damage we have done to the planet is basically irreversible.
I thought we already for sure hit the 1.5, and this is about the next 1.5.
No, that was a different threshold.
Okay.
The one you're thinking about that we hit a few years ago was like the point at which we
What was the temperature?
like 1 degree
Okay.
Celsius, and that was like if we were to avoid feeling any like serious negative effects of climate change. That's the one we already passed. So this was like the humanity might not survive this long term if we pass this.
Okay.
Yay! I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, as I want to do, like, there's a show right now called Extrapolations that's like about the future and like how we're going to tackle climate change, or basically like how we should be tackling climate change, like each like decade and stuff. And it's an interesting show, and like you gotta hope that maybe like there's some future left, but like I don't know. Strange days ahead is all I have to say.
You know, it's funny. My mom was talking to me about that same exact show not like an hour and a half ago.
It's not very good. Like, that's the thing about it, unfortunately, is that it's actually not that good of a show. But like the last episode with Ed Norton and little Gandolfini was really fucking good. Every other episode has been kind of like, you have something here, but you're not doing something interesting with it. So I don't know. Again, it's like also at the same time, there is this kind of like, with a lot of culture right now, and especially culture that's trying to like tackle these things, there is this like pervasive like liberal attitude underneath everything that's a little like, it's just that like, yeah, like this is, we're gonna accept this basically. You know, we're just gonna accept that this is gonna happen,
Yes.
unfortunately.
This is not just
Why
so
did we
much
start
fun.
with the worst thing imaginable?
I know, right?
Yeah, why did you decide that? You're the one who orders this. Anyways.
I was just thinking of like what was most important. It didn't necessarily have to be the order, but like we're just gonna go with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, there is like a, you ripped off the Band-Aid first, so. Hey.
Yeah, more or less. So according to the
Yeah.
report, more than 3 billion people already live in areas that are highly vulnerable to climate breakdown, and half of the global population now experiences severe water scarcity for at least part of the year. In many areas, the report warned, we are already reaching the limit to which we can adapt to such severe changes, and weather extremes are increasingly driving displacement of people in Africa, Asia, North, Central, and South America, and also the South Pacific. All of these impacts are set to increase rapidly as we have failed to reverse the 200-year trend of rising greenhouse gas emissions despite over 30 years of warnings from the IPCC. Temperatures are already at 1.1 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels, and if greenhouse gas emissions can be made to peak as soon as possible and are reduced rapidly in the following years, it may still be possible to avoid the worst ravages that would follow a 1.5 degree centigrade rise. Basically, we need to do like eco-socialism like yesterday.
Climate Stalin or bust.
I mean,
Basically.
yeah. Let's talk about what that means practically. Because, like, you might be worried about that out there. Like, like, how will that change my lifestyle? What we're talking about here is, like, there's a certain class of people that are consuming more goods and services and commodities and resources than any other humans have in history or are currently concurrently with these people. And it's the 1% of this country. They consume an unbelievable amount of resources, and that's what's fucking everything up. Just so you're aware. Also, war is bad. War contributes greatly to climate change and other factors. Jesse, yes, read me correctly.
I think it's an oversimplification because our entire production model globally is reliant on fossil fuel. So
yes, that is true as well.
Yes, like the 1% overconsumes, but like we also have a lot of food waste.
Yeah, we also overproduce, yeah.
A lot of it's going to have to be changing the way that farming is done. And yes, farming is, as I will talk about at the end of the episode, transnational enterprises that partake in climate-destroying farming operations. They are controlled by a very small number of people, but it is also an enterprise that is undertaken by tons and tons and tons of people. The primary product that keeps any nation afloat, in theory, probably should be its food, but like in the current configuration, we're clearing gigantic areas of land so that we can like eat more beef, and that kind of production is unsustainable.
Yeah.
But if we transitioned more to...
You ever see Big River Man?
No.
Big River Man is a movie about a guy who swam most of the Amazon in protest of like deforestation and using the rainforest land, like using Brazil's lands for meat production and like McDonald's like cattle farms and shit. It's a very good movie because at one point he basically enters a fugue state because he's been swimming for so long that he's just like starts running around the shores of the Amazon just like naked. It's like really funny. It's a very good film.
It's like the only place in the world where you can be swimming and a fish can swim up your urethra. So that's a cool fact.
Thank you.
Well, I guess we learn something new every day.
Mm-hmm.
Totally not going to be thinking about that for the rest of the day.
It's fine. Just don't swim in the Amazon.
You didn't know those existed, Joe? Those little they're like dart fish. They go right up in there and then their darts come out.
You're
basically.
Not helping.
You know?
Just keep your urethra closed while swimming in the
At all
Amazon.
times.
So does that urethra open?
God damn it. Close your urethra. Nobody wants to see that.
Dude, your urethra is down. XYZ.
Oh. Joe somehow made it grosser.
You're welcome.
Okay.
To be fair, I did not start it, but I will end it.
And where do these fish exist? They live in water. What's going on with water right now?
That was a transition.
If you have more about the climate, well, climate is also attached to water.
Yes.
We got all the transitions here, baby.
This isn't in the show notes, but like obviously climate and severe weather are tied together, but like one of the primary ingredients that maybe people don't think about necessary for tornado genesis is water.
Yeah. And there was a lot of tornadoes this weekend, yeah.
Yeah. Usually supercells pop up along places where dry and moist air as well as hot and cold air mix. There's so many different factors beyond that, but because the parts of the world that are going to have like a more tropical climate for a longer portion of the year is expanding from the, I forgot the word for the middle of the line, equator.
The equator?
because tropical weather is expanding towards the poles from the equator, like in addition to parasites that we're not used to, like ticks, different species of ticks, and other quote-unquote tropical neglected diseases. It's also fostering tornado genesis and parts of the country and times of the year that we aren't accustomed to. And recently, a huge EF4 tornado, I was watching this happen live, and it was fucking insane.
What is an EF4 tornado?
Category, it's up to 5, right?
Yeah, there hasn't been an EF5 tornado in the country since like 2013. So a big EF4 tornado is still an absolutely huge event. Very, very destructive.
Joe, have you seen Twister?
I don't think so.
Because Twister has like the clearest explanation of like the tornado scale.
Twister, for all its criticisms, undoubtedly inspired a generation of people to get involved with storm chasing, and that in turn has changed our understanding of severe weather and how to prepare for it. That said, the tornado rating scale used in that film, the Fujita scale, or F scale, was decommissioned about a decade after the film's release, in part because of the data that storm chasers have harvested from direct measurements through Doppler on wheels and specialized probes. The Fujita scale has been replaced by the EF, or Enhanced Fujita scale, which is a much more accurate and robust categorization system based on specific damage indicators, in addition to wind speeds.
But yeah, like an EF4 is basically, like, that's a big fucking storm, basically.
Yeah. If you were in an EF4 or an EF5, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference because they would probably both kill you. Basically, the biggest difference from like an observation perspective is that...
Okay. Wind
Instead
speeds of 100.
Dead, you're very, very dead.
Well, wind speeds of 166 to 200. EF5s are anything over 200. So yes, yeah.
Like if you live in a trailer, they're both going to destroy your trailer, and unfortunately, that was the case for a lot of people who got hit by last week's tornado in Rolling Fork, Mississippi. 26 people died, one of which was an infant. It's another reason why I kind of harp on like improving our weather infrastructure, because although it wasn't in a complete radar hole, like having better resolution radar would have definitely helped people to spot it sooner. The National Weather Service issued an emergency, but they issued an emergency basically after the tornado had already touched down, which they only really knew because there were storm chasers that actually saw it, and a couple of them got caught in it. One of them that I follow, his car rolled 3 times.
Is there footage of that?
No,
God damn it.
Everybody stopped chasing. All of their little trackers were just stuck in Rolling Fork because they immediately saw that it was like a bloodbath. There were people trapped underneath structures calling for help. There were people that got fucking impaled by like pieces of buildings. And that wasn't the only town that it hit. It's just that that was the town that was caught the most off guard because this area of rotation formed so quickly and so violently. They just didn't really have any lead time to prepare. So that's probably going to happen more frequently.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying. Like literal nightmare shit. Okay, wow.
And also, at the time of recording, we're coming up on several weeks of very severe weather. We're in like an active weather pattern, and we are entering the month of April, which is like one of the most prolific tornado months. So it's going to be really fucking bad. It's taken me so long to edit that one of those weeks has already gone by, and from the afternoon of March 31st overnight into April 1st, an absolutely massive tornado outbreak took place across some 15 states with over 100 confirmed tornadoes, including at least one EF4 and several fatal long track EF3s. As of April 3rd, we can expect at least one more severe weather event before a brief break in the pattern until it flips back in the second half of the month. I'll put a link if you want to donate to the people in Rolling Fork and some other towns like Silver City, Amory. I can't remember the names of the other ones off the top of my head, but a lot of people's livelihoods were just destroyed.
If the dial of ideas was turned to low for the last few years, it's quickly moving into the hot position.
That's all I could. When you said we're in an active weather period, that's all I could think. Is it's like this period is now.
The weather period is now active.
You know, like I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the climate gods have turned the dial up.
Oh baby, it's gonna get real hot in here. All right.
Water. So, speaking of, we're going from like one kind of version of like hell on earth to a much more like banal, but still like deeply like insidious and fucked up version of like the hell that is our current existence.
We're going from hell on earth as created by man's inability to like plan, and now this is hell world as
a direct result of our like machinations.
Of our evil. Yeah, exactly.
Like this is a user error situation. Like this is not like caused by nature. This is just like us doing shit to ourselves. So there is this hedge fund in New York called Water Asset Management. And
nice name, bro.
It was founded in 2005.
Water privatization corporate.
It says
company.
It invests exclusively in assets in companies that ensure water supply and quality. And its co-founder and president, Matthew Desario, called water in the United States a, quote, trillion-dollar market opportunity. Why should this matter? Who the fuck is this dipshit? Well, his company, Water Asset Management, has bought up about $20 million worth of land in Colorado. Basically, they're buying up the land to get the water rights of part of the Colorado River.
Cool.
And the western United States is currently going through the worst drought that area has seen in over 1,200 years.
This is kind of a plot line on Succession, but like this guy actually looks like Connor Roy a little bit, so it's weird. Keep going, Joe.
I appreciate that because it helps put an image to the face, like a description.
An image,
like an image. Yeah, I mean, like honestly,
instead of just kind of like some abstract, like this guy's a dipshit.
I mean, he looks like an alcoholic puppet. I'm sorry. He's got a very big nose.
Wait, what's his name? I gotta look at it.
The Cyrano or Siri. Here.
Okay.
I don't know. He looks like goofy as hell in this picture to me.
Oh, yeah.
He looks goofy.
It looks like he has two noses that are just like...
Anyways, so yeah, fuck this guy. Fuck you and your weird nose and you're fucking privatizing water. I mean, they were always going to do it, though. We're fucked. This is just... Yeah, I got anything nice to talk about, Joe? Oh, my God.
So, Water Asset Management has already acquired over 2,500 acres of farmland and is interested in water rights that will come with that. And the Colorado River is one of the primary sources of water for most of the major cities in the western United States, like Denver, Salt Lake City, Albuquerque, Los Angeles. They all heavily rely on the Colorado River. And now, to quote Andy Miller, the general manager of the Colorado River Water Conservation District, these drought profiteers are just vultures who are looking to make a lot of money off of public resources. Water in Colorado, water in the western United States is your future. Without water, you have no future.
Yeah, you literally can't survive without it, so...
So they're gonna, like, charge the states that, like, the land the water goes through? Like, no, you can't have your water unless you pay us? Like, is that how this works?
So they're basically going to become, like, the landlords, but of water.
So yes.
Yes.
Okay, they're gonna make the states pay for their own fucking water. Okay, that's fucking ridiculous. You know, we could pass laws against these things, but
We could.
why would we do
but
that? Free market
we
capitalism.
wouldn't, because like that would make rich people sad.
If you search this guy's name on Google Images, all of the results are from fucking fintech.tv.
From what?
Fintech.
Fin.
Like, Drew absolutely hates those kind of people, and rightly so, because they are tech bros, but even worse. They're like the finance version of tech bros.
I was gonna say they're tech bros, but with money. Okay.
They basically can generate capital out of like farts. And then sell it.
They're the disruptors.
And by disruptors, disrupting your lives as you discover too late that we are in fact a predatory lender.
Like that is what the Silicon Valley Bank is for. Like,
yeah, basically what it was. That's why it collapsed so quickly, is because all of the dude bros that they're doing business with
it's just
aren't
farts.
actually worth anything.
Farts aren't worth anything.
In reality.
I'm not even kidding, dude. There's a new soundboard that is all just farts and belches.
Whoa.
Okay.
If there's anything going on in the background, like, I don't know what. I think there's something in a box that my cats are trying to get, but I don't know what it is. Did you find it, Squiddy?
We're on the water is now privatized stage of capitalism.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Talking about Biden. Are we going to talk about Biden
No,
and his?
we're still on the water.
We're still talking about this bullshit. What are you talking about? I got it.
Well,
It's important. We need it to live.
In the broader
so.
sense, this kind of stuff of like buying up like water rights, trying to like increasingly turning water into like a speculative commodity, comes as the world is facing like a global water crisis. There is an article from The Guardian, March 16th, that concludes that global fresh water demand will outstrip supply by 40% by the year 2030.
Yeah, this is just one of those events where if an extraterrestrial race was looking at Earth to pinpoint different stages of its development that led to its complete demise, they'd be like,
yes, and then that fintech guy fucking privatized all of the Colorado River.
We're not going to go out with a bang. We're going to go out with a wheeze.
I don't know if they'd look at it that way, but yeah.
So, according to a UN report, governments must urgently stop subsidizing the extraction and overuse of water through misdirected agricultural subsidies in industries from mining to manufacturing, and must be made to overhaul their wasteful practices. Nations have to start managing water as a global common good because most countries are highly dependent on their neighbors for water supplies, and overuse, pollution, and the climate crisis threaten water supplies globally. So yeah.
We could pass laws, but we don't.
Yeah.
The way that the United States alone subsidizes farming it's like an open invitation to pollute because we value fucking ethanol more than we value water, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Maybe you do. Just kidding.
Is that enough with the water?
Yeah.
All right. Love you, Joe. Go to what the Biden's drilling.
It's funny. We go from like how
stories.
water's being privatized to how we're now allowing corporations to drill for oil in the ocean.
Yeah, no, that's
also
water.
water.
Kind of the,
Hey man, I think if you want to kill two birds with one stone, just get like a desalination plant like Kickstarter going, and then as the sea level rises, you can just take the salt out of it and drink it.
It sounds crazy, but it's just might work.
That sounds like a rational, insane thing to do, which is exactly why it won't happen.
Alas.
Never know.
Because that just makes too much sense for like anybody in a position of power to actually want to do it.
It's too expensive, that's why.
Biden?
By expensive, we mean spending money on poor people.
All right, where's the drilling?
So, the U.S. government, the Department of the Interior to be specific, and it's amazing how like Deb Haaland, during the confirmation process, Deb Haaland's like one of the best, most progressive picks for Biden's cabinet. She's the first indigenous person to be the Interior Secretary, and now she's auctioning 1.6 million acres of land in the Gulf of Mexico for oil drilling. It's been put up for auction. It's about 1.6 million acres, 313 tracts of ocean. There are 32 fossil fuel companies involved in the auction, collectively bidding around $309 million for drilling rights. So in all, 73.3 million acres was made available, which is actually about like the size of Italy. And the timing is really not that great because next month is like the 13th anniversary of like the Deepwater Horizon oil spill.
Well, that's not a very important
okay.
anniversary. 13th anniversary. If it was like the 50th anniversary or something, then I, would be more inclined to.
Did you see that movie? It was good.
And the this like tract of ocean or whatever has the potential to extract more than 1 billion barrels of oil and 4.4 trillion cubic feet of gas over the next 50 years.
You gotta extract the gas. You don't want to. What if it burps too early? That would be dangerous. You gotta get the gas out before it burps.
Oh God.
That's exactly what it would sound like.
That was so good.
That will happen, but at a much larger scale.
Not really, though.
The Earth is gonna belch one day.
It's gonna be Scott, but like magnified by like 1 million times.
What?
Scott is going to burp, and then like everything is going to explode.
That was a soundboard.
Yeah, I mean,
was
like
making a joke.
I'm cutting this out in post.
Oh God damn it! Yeah, Biden's a piece of shit. I mean, like, yeah, Biden sucks. Fuck him.
The Gulf of Mexico has been turned into a dead zone because of the amount of nitrites from farming operations that like fucking flow out of the Louisiana, Mississippi Delta. So now we're just making sure like anything that survives that is just going to die in a fucking oil spill. So I don't know. Fuck it. Let's just kill the rest of them.
Can't wait till I die in an oil spill.
And then we can have like a cute Dawn dish soap ad about it. And then everybody wins, I guess, except for like
the dead,
the Earth.
Yeah,
But
we're making profits, so we won.
I guess.
You know, those of us who like need oxygen to breathe.
Those of us who
live.
So
that's where you go wrong. You're still living.
Nah, it's fine. It'll be fine. It'll be,
I'm sure it'll be.
There's people who need to live. Whatever. They'll live with it.
Or they won't live with it, or they'll die.
Yes.
I mean,
but they'll be dead.
That is
so they won't
how
care.
really things work. You either live or you don't.
I know. Yeah.
It's a good point.
Nurses help you live, right? Oh.
Well, they only help when they're not leaving the nursing sector because they're not getting paid enough and the working conditions are shitty. Which is 1 in 5 nurses in Massachusetts have reported that they are planning to leave the nursing profession within the next 2 years or less. 40% of them plan to retire. Another sizable chunk plan to just get a different healthcare-related job. The rest of them are just planning to just go find a completely different career outside of healthcare altogether.
Yeah. This is very much representative of the way that the United States has financialized healthcare, because most of those jobs are just in doing bullshit paperwork and medical coding, which is arguably a much easier career path.
Well, nurses are in the moment. They're much more important than doctors in giving care. Nurses keep people alive. Doctors just fix the problem. Why did I stun you? What happened?
I'm just thinking of the doctor-nurse dialectic now. That's a whole other layer of...
No, but my broad point is that you kind of can't blame them for this because nurses get a lot.
What do you mean you can't? I don't blame them at all.
No, one of the main reasons they're saying that is the working conditions, because I don't know, we had this whole ballot question called Question 1 back in 2018 where the nurses wanted to have, and I don't know how this is supposed to be generous to them. Only 15 patients per one nurse. That still sounds like a lot of fucking patients. And yet that got absolutely just buried under hospital association money. It only got like 30% of the vote.
I thought the ballot question was 1 to 3, which is still like very reasonable.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say that's too much. I was like, that's what? That's a good number.
No, that's appropriate.
Yeah.
That is what it arguably should be.
On a shift, a nurse like max should only see like 5 patients. Like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what level of care they're in.
And when I said you can't blame them, I mean like anybody listening to this, not just you guys. Because the broader point is that this country, like the thing you were talking about with like the dialectic between doctors and nurses, is like we've been so like socialized to like not respect nurses as much as they deserve, which is then that allows for the whole slope of how we treat them, how we pay them, how many fucking patients we load onto them and stuff, as well as the fucking degradation and disillusion of like American healthcare. It is like on both ends that they're getting it. So
Joe and I were talking about this last night, I think. People misplace the resentment that they have against the privatization of healthcare, against healthcare staff, and against medical professionals, even though those medical professionals are some of the most vocal and organized opponents against privatization of healthcare because it prevents them from being able to properly treat their fucking patients.
Yeah, that's a great point too. Thank you.
It's not a good time.
No, it has to do with this.
All right, fine. I'm going to bring Carlene on for...
Can I just tell you, then you
can you just tell me separately, and then I can...
Yes. I was in Borders, which is part of the ED, and I was listening into a conversation.
We don't have time podcasting, people.
And I was listening into a conversation, and this dude needed this like shot, but it was like $6,000, and like the family couldn't afford it.
Yeah, very good example.
That's insane. Jesus Christ.
I mean, imagine being that doctor. I would be afraid of a fucking medical malpractice suit if it came down to that. Because if you know what you need to do and you cannot procure the medicine that you need.
Yeah, that's another thing, because that fucking pits like EMTs against doctors. Because like EMTs are supposed to work as fucking hard as they can, but the second the patient gets to the hospital, if the doctor knows nothing they can do, it's over. I can't do this, you know? And it's largely based on like the finite amount of resources that we allow doctors to have. It creates all these false fucking artificial resentments that shouldn't be there.
Yes, it degrades class consciousness and class solidarity among people that have some of the hardest jobs. There are a few jobs that are more difficult than if you're in an emergency care, like whether you're in EMS, whether you're driving an ambulance, whether you are nursing staff in an emergency room. Like, those are incredibly stressful environments that require an immense amount of education and emotional regulation that I certainly don't fucking have, directly working with the public when they are at their absolute worst on a schedule that you do not get to control. So yeah, fucking, if nurses want to not subject themselves to that, especially if they're not getting paid adequately to do so, then I 1000% understand why they are looking for jobs in other fields, because we don't give them any fucking incentive to stay where they are.
Yeah, and like also, COVID was a meat grinder for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Underpaid and dying in masses during COVID. Like, come on. I mean, again, like it's...
And being told to get back into the meat grinder and put a smile on your face.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, and like the most important people in this country, we, like educators and doctors...
Sanitation workers.
We don't treat people with respect. Well, sanitation workers do pretty well. You gotta like...
I mean, like, you work in terms of like... You said like how we're like respecting people.
Yeah, the way that society views
works
them.
with shit. Fuck that guy. No, I'm kidding. I will always respect a sanitation worker because like they put up with... You don't know what people flush down the toilets.
They have an essential function in society. But like you said, actually, yeah, like people who work at sewage treatment plants.
You don't want the plague.
Yeah, literally. Society is fucking collapse when like sanitation workers go on strike. That's why French sanitation workers are striking, because it's very, very obvious how important their role in society is.
Actually, they had to like go back to work for like one day because they hadn't done any like sanitation work in like 3 weeks. in Paris
Yeah,
basically collapsing.
There was huge piles of fucking garbage. Didn't they like move all of it like in front of that building?
Yeah, they actually jumped it
They
in
made
front
a tower of
That
garbage.
is one big pile of shit.
They actually got like forklifts to basically take giant piles of it and then dump it on the front steps of the French Parliament building.
So based.
That's
so
awesome.
based.
Yeah.
There's
Good
been a lot
God.
of forklift-related baseness from like the French workers. Like there were like some port workers who like
Forklift
picked up, like used a
related
forklift to pick up a
baseness.
car and then like dump it into a fire.
I think that
That's
would be
the episode title. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great.
Thank you for saying that, Joe. God damn it. Oh. Right, yeah, France.
An accurate description of events.
Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. What is like with they want to raise the retirement age by like 3 years or whatever, which is bullshit. But like, is Macron basically like doing this unilaterally? To my understanding,
Yes.
like basically
He is
nobody
doing
wants
this
this.
unilaterally.
No like political party, no citizen, nobody
Like
wants this. But
he actually passed it without. He actually bypassed
Yeah, exactly.
Parliament entirely.
Okay, so that's fascism.
Yeah.
It was basically an executive order.
No, an executive order can be repealed pretty easily. But Article 49.3 of the French Constitution apparently allows the president to basically unilaterally pass a law without even having a vote in Parliament, so long as the cabinet has been consulted of it.
And they can't repeal it?
No, they did. They had a no confidence vote, which would have, if it had succeeded,
Oh.
not only would the retirement age hike been overturned, but the ruling majority government and Parliament would have had to like resign, and there would be like snap elections called. But the center right bailed out Macron because the French left like completely came together, which is not an easy thing to do because they are so factional.
Yeah.
The entire French left came together to support no confidence vote. The far right actually came together to join the left in the no confidence vote to try to overturn the pension age increase. And then like the center and the center right, Macron's centrist party and like the center right Republicans
Fucking weird country.
voted to like codify the pension increase age.
There is a parallel with the United States, and that is the only candidate right now that is very vocal about leaving Social Security and Medicare
Is Donald Trump.
untouched is Donald fucking Trump.
Weird world.
I mean, that's
I don't know.
one of the big reasons that he won the Republican primary in 2016 in the first place. He was the only Republican who was explicitly like, I don't want to go after Social Security or Medicare, and I think the Iraq War was bad.
Yeah. I mean, you could say what you want about him. Like, one, he is funny, and two, he actually has his finger on the pulse of the country.
Yeah.
He's an idiot, but like he likes it when people like him.
Yeah, I know. Like he does like the right things for the wrong reasons.
Yes, exactly.
And as long as the right things are happening, I could give a fuck less about like what the motivation is behind it.
I'm sorry if you hear ambient noise.
What was that? Was that?
If he just appeared in my, I don't know if appear is the right word because you hear it with your ear balls.
What's going on with Israel? It's like melting down.
I mean, it's basically just like one group of one
Joe was
faction
gonna
of
know.
fascists like fight. It's like a culture war amongst fascists about like how to do ethnic cleansing. They agree in principle that we want to do the ethnic cleansing, we want to get rid of the Palestinians, but it's basically just like a disagreement about how exactly to go about doing that.
Yeah, it's pretty cringe, and I think it overshadows.
It's really wild how like Western media is like billing this as like it's a struggle for democracy. No, it's a struggle about like how to do the final solution type shit, but the Arabs.
Well, there was an interview on Chapo. It was a very good interview from the perspective.
I did listen to it today, and now I totally get why you thought I already listened to it.
Yeah, the guy pretty much said what you had said, almost word for word, on the Russo-Ukrainian conflict. However, we're talking about Israel-Palestine, and the fundamental fucking problem when you talk about struggle for democracy in Israel. What about Palestinians, dude?
Yeah, exactly.
What about the people who have no democracy to fucking begin with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. God
When
damn
like
it.
half the population doesn't even have like basic rights, you
called
can't talk about
apartheid.
democracy.
It is apartheid.
Yes, it's called you have fuck your democracy, fix your apartheid, you assholes, get rid of that. Serious. I mean, you know.
No, I just love the way you put it.
Like, no, actually, like, I do kind of agree. Like, you can use whataboutism in, like, legitimate cases, and this is a legitimate case of, like, fuck off with your aspersions towards democracy. Fix the fucking fascist apartheid state that you've built, which, like, they're not going to, obviously. They would laugh at me and tell me that I'm, like, a fucking, like, cuck bitch or whatever. Like, I don't know. They would call me, like, a dog. Like, a dog of an Arab dog lover. I don't know.
No, they would call you an anti-Semite.
Right.
There's not even like a center right in Israel. It's just like a right wing, a far right wing, and even further right wing, and that's basically the entire political spectrum.
What I'm thinking about is that video that Avi Martin did with the Israeli nationalists, where they're literally saying, like, yes, like, I think we should,
yes, we
like,
wanna kill
the
them.
Palestinians are not human. We should kill them. It's like, whoa. Like, that is just, like, the basic socialized belief of people in Israel. So, like,
what was really wild to me was like how casual and like matter of fact they were about it too. They're like, it's like they were talking about like the weather or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's why I say it's the basic socialized just fact of living in that country as an Israeli, is that, like, it's so common. It's just like, it's casual to them. Thank you, Joe. You've highlighted my point. I'm sorry. I'm just Joe's been on point tonight, like, very well. Like, I'm very happy, and I'm just feeling good in my, like, I had a very good, like, therapy session as well. So, like, I'm on a level tonight. Oh, and I had a coffee, which I don't usually have after like 6 o'clock, but I did. But anyways, I'm all over the fucking place, right? Yeah. Speaking of coffee,
I'm happy to add to the good vibes.
Yeah, they really are good vibes.
Speaking of fucking coffee,
Mr. Howard Schultz. Oh God, there was a Senate committee hearing about his the labor practices of Starbucks and the abuses, but more importantly, because like Senate hearings, like like TikTok is doing the Senate hearing right now. Are they going to ban TikTok? Like, ew, like.
Well, I mean, you are like under oath.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but like the fact of the matter is, what I'm talking about is I don't think like the government is going to do much to reprimand Starbucks or like any major capitalist entity.
The National Labor Relations Board has been pretty aggressive.
They have been, but like, what power do they really have? The government has to do something, you know? But broader speaking, the shareholders have actually started to express serious doubts towards Starbucks' labor practices and has called for a third-party investigation into their labor practices, and that's a positive.
Well, that's the usefulness of these kind of like Senate hearings, whatever. It's like the hearings themselves probably won't do much, but it's like it creates like the media attention and that puts the pressure on.
Yeah, no, exactly. So there is something materially good that's coming out of it. That's literally what I just said, Joe. Yes. Oh, I love him. But yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Because, like, I have my criticisms of the
NLRB.
And I have my criticisms of how Bernie is handling labor stuff. But again, like, they're all tied, their hands are tied behind their backs by a government that doesn't want to do anything about rampant capitalism. But if, like, the shareholders are expressing doubts, then, like, somebody is, like, hearing the message. So that's good.
Somebody is either hearing the message or worrying about the future loss of, like, profits.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, like, I mean, Starbucks is a bullshit company. I actually don't want to keep talking about it.
I will say, though, that I caught the opening remarks from Sanders, and it was really cathartic to see him just not pull any punches. Because he's like...
at least they're laying into him, yeah.
We're here to talk about the illegal practices of the most, like, aggressive anti-union campaign in, like, modern American history. And Mr. Schultz is only here because of a threat of a subpoena.
Yeah.
Mr. Schultz.
But you did mention, like, the TikTok thing, and I was showing that clip of that congressperson. It really was hilarious to, like, have to watch this poor, like, CEO of TikTok have to try to explain to this Republican from North Carolina how Wi-Fi works.
I'll put a clip of that in post.
That harkens back to the days of, like...
Mr. Chu, does TikTok access the home Wi-Fi network?
Only if the user turns on the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, I may not understand the...
So if I have TikTok app on my phone and my phone is on my home Wi-Fi network, does TikTok access that network?
It will have to to access the network to get connections to the internet, if that's the question.
Is it possible then that it could access other devices on that home Wi-Fi network?
It's a series of tubes.
It's all in the tubes,
Nobody
man.
knows what fucking computers are. It's so awesome that we've had this technology for like, I don't know, since like the 30s now, for like literally like
and nobody knows how it works.
years, and nobody fucking has ever bothered to like it's still just a box of magic. Like it's like that, like you know, like it's just ridiculous. Anyways, yeah, and Narcan is now.
It's not the same technology as it was.
We've replaced God with the cloud.
Did you say the 1930s or for 30 years?
No, since like the 1930s, because like early radar and shit.
No, dude, it's not the same shit.
Well, I'm talking about like really super like proto early computing. But okay, yes. But anyways, we've had computing technology for a long time. We've had the internet for a long time too.
The first computers were women. That used to be a job that you have.
Now
Yes.
I seem to No, actually, when you put it that way, a country run by men refusing to understand it. Oh, that's like, I don't know if that's a bad joke or whatever. Anyways.
I think it's pretty. It's all right. It's pretty
I
apt.
don't know. It was whatever. Yeah. Narcan. You can go buy it in stores soon. Or steal it, whatever. But anyways,
Yeah.
it'll be more readily available for you, and that's good.
Fuck buying it, but you can
No.
access it in stores. I'm not going to tell you how.
You're gonna buy it? That's lame. Just
Yeah, in Vermont they're lifting a lot of their end-of-life care restrictions, so like you don't have to be a citizen of the state if you want to pursue end-of-life care
that's awesome.
in Vermont, which is the same thing that's going on, which is already the case in Oregon. So Oregon. I don't call it Oregon. Yeah, Oregon.
Origami.
Yeah.
The
So
great
yeah.
state of origami.
So when my time comes, just, it's not that. It's like a 5-hour drive. So
We're going on a road trip to Vermont.
Yeah, exactly.
Joe,
What the fuck do you have against fucking sports betting, sports gambling? What is? Let me back this up a little bit. That like there's like sports betting is coming to Massachusetts soon, or is it already here? Anyways,
It's already
there's a lot
here.
of already here. Yes, there's. Oh God, yeah. There's an ad
DraftKings
everywhere for it.
Sportsbook.
Every podcast you listen to, every fucking I'm getting the mailers too. I've gotten like 3. It's like it's like blow my fucking head out.
You can't escape.
Yeah, exactly.
There
It's
is no
everywhere.
escape. Resistance
Fucking
is
everywhere.
futile.
And in every podcast that they advertise on, it's like 3 times as loud as the context that it's
Yeah,
in.
they fucking ruined Behind the Bastards for me. Oh God. Like my position on this is I'm kind of ambivalent towards gambling, but Joe's against it, and I want to know why.
Before he goes real quick, I will say there is like a historical precedent of capitalists explicitly saying that gambling is like a way to extract more surplus from the poor even when they aren't working. So that's one reason, but I'll let Joe have his piece.
Yeah, it's that's one reason, but it's also like it's another excuse for like not taxing the wealthy, because a lot of states like Massachusetts, for example, proceeds from, the lottery becomes like tax revenue for the state to fill holes in the budget. We have the money now, so we don't need to bother going to the effort of trying to get a little bit more tax revenue out of the wealthy, because we've already got this lottery money coming in. It is deeply insidious. And is also like not to minimize the experience of people suffering from chemical-related substance misuse disorders, but like it's arguably in some ways worse, because at least with a drug or an alcohol disorder, for the most part, usually the only life that you're ruining is your own. Whereas with gambling, you can very easily not only destroy your own life, but the lives of your entire family.
Okay.
There was this lawsuit a few years ago with some of the app companies. I remember Sarah telling me that she had an issue with this because they basically are like trying to target like people who have like impulse control issues. Mobile app games where like it's like free to play, but like the only way to really like advance a lot in a game is that you have to make a bunch of like microtransactions, and so that adds up very quickly, because like it's very easy to fall into that pattern of like a few bucks here, a few bucks there. What's the harm in that? And then it becomes like normalized, and then it just keeps snowballing and snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. Next thing you know, you're financially fucked because you spent like $100 on like microtransactions or whatever the fuck without even really realizing it.
Yeah, I mean,
And the
yeah.
insane thing is, it's like, it's completely out in the open. Literally, like, everywhere you go. In Massachusetts, for example, like, I literally can't leave the house. I can't go on social media. I can't even fucking check the mail without being bombarded with, like, ads of being like,
you should start gambling.
With what money? I'm already broke.
The primary issue that I have with sports betting as like a campaign, as like in the way that it's portrayed now as being different from traditional gambling, is that consumers are being sold the idea that it's about strategy. Like, it is categorically separate from traditional gambling because if you're like smart enough about it, then it can actually be a legitimate money-making venture for you. But it's not. Like, the house always fucking wins.
That and also,
Alright.
like, it's like the further commodification of your free time. It's not enough that you're watching a baseball game. Now, we want you to gamble on the baseball game that you are watching, which is supposed to be, like, something you do in your free time when you are not, like, actively producing labor value for an employer, for a capitalist. Now, you've got to spend those resources on the thing that you're supposed to be, like, just watching to relax or whatever the fuck. And also, like, instead of, like, creating a society in which everyone's needs are just met, like, in a better world that we obviously don't exist within, it's the idea of, like, you have to, like, try to be, like, the lucky person who is able to, like, escape the material, like, degradation and, like, the lack of, like, resources, instead of, like, trying to collectively organize to achieve greater material gains across the board for everybody. It's this idea of, like, the temporarily embarrassed millionaire or something like that. Everybody can make it.
Furthermore, to the extent that there is any strategy involved, like, we already know that the guys who make a shitload of money on gambling are doing the same thing that, like, crypto bros do, where they just have a lot of machines running numbers constantly. So the people with the superior hardware and software are the only ones that can actually make any money.
All right. Well, okay. What about? I mean, the question that keeps coming up in my mind is that, like, what about if we lived in that perfect society? Like, would you still allow? Like, because, like, I still see it as, like, regulating a vice, which is just, like, not a thing that I think we should be doing. I don't mean, like, no regulation whatsoever. Like, obviously, like, if drugs were legal, we would obviously, like, some level, like, try to control distribution and, like, just, like, not have it everywhere and whatever, and, like, inject sites and stuff, you know, things like that. And I'm just thinking, like, if we were in an ideal world, like, I guess it wouldn't matter. So I guess that kind of answers the question. I mean, like,
but that's the thing, though. We don't live in that ideal world.
Sure, but, like, at the same time, all your arguments are, like, in the same breath as they are bringing me closer to you convincing me, it's also pushing me further away. Like, at the same time, it's weird. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess it just comes down to the individual and, like, how you feel about it. But, like, no, like, all your points are incredibly valid, and maybe that's, like, I should just take the materialist approach and say, like, yeah, you know, like, at the end of the day, like, maybe you're right, you know.
What you just said perfectly encapsulates what I said in the Discord, which is the reason it's both validating and invalidating your perspective is because we're being presented with a false binary where it either has to be illegal or immensely profitable, when in truth, it doesn't have to be either.
Yeah, it's ultimately like a policy choice.
All right.
It doesn't have to be like a criminal enterprise or a capitalist venture to extract super profits.
It doesn't have to be, but that's like the inevitable outcome of a capitalist system.
Profits. I don't know.
Well, the reason that things are becoming legal, like weed, gambling, is because it's the only thing left to extract profits from. I said this last time.
Sports betting has been, like, very, very tightly regulated for decades. And the only reason that they're opening it up now is because the profits the capitalists are making just isn't enough for them anymore.
It's altering moral hegemon to match capitalistic hegemon.
Yeah.
We just convince ourselves that the market is good.
The market knows what's best for us.
Anything that increases GDP is de facto moral.
Good, yeah. Yeah. Well, you've actually given me a lot to consider. I look forward to listening back to this and reconsidering them. Give us that throwy premiere. Theory primer.
Yeah, throwy premiere. This is Theory Primer. The shit you said you didn't have time for. Keep your presence really messy with Conrad Jesse. By the way, this is a Theory Primer on bureaucratic capitalism. I want to preface this with the fact that the text that prompted me to do this Theory Primer is called Notes on the Process of Bureaucratic Capitalism in the Third World Countries. It was published by the Peru People's Movement, the Peruvian Communist Party, the Reorganization Committee, in January 2014, and it was translated into English. This Reorganization Committee is clearly sympathetic to the shining path of Peru, which I would almost put it in the same category as like Khmer Rouge.
Sounds bad.
Yeah, it's like one of the worst examples of non-aligned revolutionary socialist movements. However, it draws from some very good theory. Like, none of it is original thought, but it's packaged as original thought. And in particular, it's packaged as Gonzalo thought. Chairman Gonzalo, in my opinion, was about as legitimate of a theoretician as J. Posadas. In retrospect, I think this was an exaggeration. There wasn't really anything uniquely egregious, or unique at all, about Gonzalo or the errors made by the Shining Path, but that's also why I'm being critical. The Bolsheviks and the Chinese Communist Party had already demonstrated some of the dangers of commandism in the countryside, occupying a rural community with the expectation that there's going to be a clear distinction between the oppressor and the oppressed, and that any resistance to a radically different way of life justifies punishment, is not a new or a correct strategy. On those grounds, I'm less willing to excuse the mistakes of someone like Chairman Gonzalo Abimael Guzman, who speaks highly of himself as a theorist and as a figurehead for the revolutionary masses. Let's use these mistakes as opportunities to learn new strategies, so that we are doing more to unite the underclass than to further fracture it. And last point definitely worth mentioning, Gonzalo never accepted American money to slaughter other communists, while Pol Pot absolutely did. There was a genuine material impact as a result of the Shining Path, like when contrasted with the state repression that indigenous Peruvians were facing. It wasn't necessarily worse, but it definitely wasn't a whole lot better. That said, because this text draws on some demonstrably correct theory of the three people in particular were Mariátegui, or Mariátegui, I think is how you're supposed to pronounce it, who described the oppression of indigenous Peruvians by feudal elements of Peruvian society that remained after Peru's official independence, as well as Lenin, who described imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism, as well as Mao, who outlined the revolutionary framework for an eventual transition to communism via the People's War. So that's the theoretical basis: Mariátegui, Lenin, and Mao. So this text, Notes on the Process of Bureaucratic Capitalism, builds on another text that I narrated, namely Lenin's Imperialism pamphlet, which is now available to non-patrons, and that outlines the development of capitalist imperialism. It's the definition of imperialism that I think is most pertinent in our modern context, despite having been written
almost a century
100
ago.
and more than a century ago, like 110
I'm
years
bad at math,
ago.
okay?
It's okay. You're fucking incredible at history. So I don't know. Maybe there's something I'll forget that you'll be able to fill in. If at any point, if you need clarification on something, I may or may not be able to give it, but I'm going to do my best. So stop me if you need clarification. The imperialism pamphlet was written at the beginning of the 20th century, and that was a point at which all of the Earth's land had already been claimed, and many of the territories that were ostensibly independent were still basically territories under the control of colonial powers, what we would think of as quote unquote the West. So that was like Germany, France, the United States, Japan. I know Japan technically isn't in the West, but we are politically and economically aligned with Japan in more ways than we aren't. Through industrialization, the primary mode of production at the beginning of the 20th century in the imperial core, it had undergone an evolution from more primitive mercantilism to full-blown industrial capitalism. And that necessitated certain economies of scale, factory floor, large-scale capitalism. Industrial capital had been concentrated by then to such a degree that markets were no longer characterized by free competition between, individual small-scale producers, but they were being dominated by monopolies. Think about Standard Oil, for instance. Banking capital, having undergone a similar consolidation, was being managed through a hierarchy of subsidiaries. In the imperialism pamphlet, there is a diagram that I tried my best to narrate and probably failed at doing. So the integration of that monopolized industrial capital and similarly monopolized banking capital gave rise to something called finance capital, basically a financial oligarchy. And that oligarchy, through amassing surplus capital at home, meaning in the imperial core, sought to increase their profits by investing abroad, where land, labor, and resources were cheapest, as to funnel the capital generated in the imperialized nations back into the imperial core. And as the size of those operations grew, it then became necessary to facilitate power sharing agreements between the centers of power in the imperial core through international organizations like the World Trade Organization, as an example. So where is bureaucratic capitalism in relation to this whole process? Bureaucratic capitalism is the system forced upon the imperialized nations. Generally begins with industrial capitalists, private capitalists, investing their surplus in the quote-unquote undeveloped nations, what we would call the third world, which is a misnomer dating back to the non-aligned movement. The third world used to just be the nations that neither sided with the Soviet Union nor with China. Neither with the Soviet Union nor the United States, which often led to a coalition with China. But the whole point of that third world does not mean the lowest stage of development. It just means that they weren't part of the Soviet bloc. So industrial capitalists, the third world, it generally begins with industrial capitalists privately investing surplus profits in the nations which have not developed their own robust systems of capitalism independently, and particularly, although not necessarily, where elements of feudalism can serve as a sort of buffer to prevent the imperialized masses from pushing back as a cohesive anti-imperialist force. Basically, people's war. The aspiring first world capitalist will basically purchase the rights to exploit the masses of the target country by hiring a middleman or many middlemen, and these people are known as the comprador class of the target country. The resources and capital are then funneled through the compradors into the target country, resulting in further monopolization by monopolization of those foreign markets, as local producers cannot compete because they just don't have the same level of industrial capital. This comprador class builds upon its power, eventually surpassing that of the petty bourgeoisie, to the point where the comprador class gains influence over the mechanisms of the state itself, and then the state adapts its own policy to further facilitate inflow of capital through the private comprador class. So then there's a further alignment between the state and the private sector to bolster development of industrial capitalism, and we call this bureaucratic capitalism, or bureaucrat comprador capitalism, but in the text that I'm referring to, they just call it bureaucratic capitalism. This is not simply state capitalism. Because of its particular character, it is referred to as state monopoly capitalism. And where feudal land relations are still exercised, I guess, basically in the nations where there's still heavy elements of feudalism, heavy elements, imperial powers kind of exploit that stratification by hold on. I have like too many things in one. I write all this shit in Vim, which is like a
Vim?
it's like a text. It's like It's like a later iteration of an extremely, extremely basic text-based program called VI or VI.
Oh.
That goes back to like 1960. So this is literally what I wrote in my notes is rather than plopping capitalism on top of feudalism, existing feudal mechanisms in regard to relations of power are maintained, but value form reflects that of capitalism, i.e. peasant farmers paying tribute to religious elder become unskilled employees of transnational enterprise paying rent to an LLC. Okay, so what I think I was trying to say is that in nations that are exploited by the international capitalists, by the capitalist imperialism, the elements of feudalism don't go away. They just change shape, basically. It's the same dynamics, but it looks different because rather than feudal lords extracting tribute, the feudal lords just extract rent. And rather than the peasantry doing like subsistence labor, they are doing labor as employees of these transnational enterprises. So they're basically still being exploited to the same degree. It just looks different. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Same
Okay.
shit, different packaging.
This whole text, really, I think they could have done a little bit of a better job presenting it because some of it was like, seemed pretty obvious to me, and some of it was like not worded well enough that I could understand it at all. But in reading back on it a few times, I think this portion of it is what makes it unique, is the way that it presented what is called fragmentation of production. And basically, this is a technique that like large-scale producers use to keep undeveloped nations from developing, and especially from developing a kind of capitalism that would allow them to become independent of the monopoly capital that is exploiting it, I guess you could say.
Being allowed to be in a position to bite the hand that feeds it.
Yes, exactly. It propagates this dependency basically forever.
You have to look no further than like North Africa's relationship with France.
This text specifically referred to Southeast Asia.
Do you want to change it?
So what this looks like is the parent company in the imperial core will set up like an array of subsidiaries in these imperialized nations, but none of them have enough information to make a finished product. So each of the imperialized nations will have like a little piece of production carved out and handed over to them.
I mean, that kind of sounds like a production line.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But it's done on such a scale that they don't have any communication with the other pieces, and they can't access it because of the degree of like vertical integration going on. I didn't get this into my notes in time, but I've been thinking about it for a day or so after recording. Alienation. Not just alienation in the social sense, but in the Marxian sense. Alienation from the product of labor, from the process of labor, from the self, and from other workers. Fragmentation of production ticks all of those boxes. Using someone else's old tools on someone else's land to make a small piece of a foreign product which will be sold in another part of the world, with no opportunity to impart a piece of oneself onto that fragment, let alone any opportunity to purchase it for oneself, or to witness the utility of that fragment in the life of the consumer, all to sustain oneself for the opportunity to do the same thing the next day, or otherwise face dismissal and replacement by another machinized unit of human labor. While this may be a marginally more stable existence than that of the subsistence farmer, who's to say that this new form of alienation is preferable? For someone who finds purpose in their relationship to the tools that they wield, to the gardens and crops that they grow, for some, even the land and dwellings that they occupy, with the animals that they feed, the textiles that they weave, the friends and family that they work alongside, those that live nearby, who share a common language, faith, and history, unless the fundamental alienation of the peasantry from the whiter, wealthier, land-owning classes is completely resolved through the process of industrialization, and we know that it isn't, then I struggle to imagine an alienation as thorough as that of fragmentation of production under bureaucratic capitalism. So particularly in Southeast Asia, economies are dependent on their exports of individual components. Think like, I don't know, little chips and fucking wiring and
microprocessors.
Yeah, like that seems like an insanely complex part compared to like a little electrical component in a toothbrush or something. But in Southeast Asia in particular, these economies are dependent on exports of individual components, which are then exported and assembled in a separate nation, only to be sold back on the American market. And the examples that were given were like the 4 Asian tigers: South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. There is both the middleman in terms of the comprador capitalist class, but there's also the middleman in terms of subsidiaries, where one layer below the international capitalists is like just a base of operations. And then from there, there is a further level of subsidiaries that is producing components, exporting that back to the middleman for assembly, back to the next tier, which is the actual finished product. Mid-level assemblers rely on the capital inflow and expertise of their parent companies, as well as the cheap labor of their daughter companies to produce like a valuable commodity. Whereas the low-level producers are dependent on capital in the form of like machinery, which the parent companies quite honestly see as having no value. No value meaning that A, they're cheap assets, considered outdated and not worth maintaining in the imperial core, and B, they don't confer any substantive technological advantages to the imperial periphery, so that the daughter companies can produce the constituent parts from raw materials. Thus, the capital that flows in just ends up flowing right back out. Even if they manage to make like a functionally equivalent product, the intellectual property that was used to create the product prevents them from being able to independently make any profit. They just end up funneling all of the capital back up to the top either way.
Daughter and granddaughter subsidiaries
never benefit from any new developments in R&D, and furthermore, client countries end up competing for their own exploitation by making the investment climate as favorable as possible to investors, including infrastructure projects that only benefit the international bourgeoisie who are trying to carry out these capitalistic ventures. And there is actually a pretty good parallel to this in the United States with what Amazon did.
Yeah, all those cities basically, like how far can you bend backwards to
exactly
get our table scraps?
And this happened in Boston with GE. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
Marty Walsh was ready to cut like
$25 million
out of the fucking city budget to make a company town for GE, complete with a fucking helipad. And that never happened. But
who needs education? We can just give you a helipad.
That was in exchange for what? One factory?
Yeah, one factory and like at most like 25,000 jobs at most.
So you can only imagine when this is happening across international borders and at multiple layers of investment. So this presents obviously many challenges. If you're talking about how do you create a revolution, how do you organize a revolution to push back on this kind of exploitation? Because even if you have a successful revolution, then the international bourgeoisie will just fucking leave. They'll just take the capital that they've invested and up and go and find somebody else to exploit. So Mao developed a revolutionary framework, and he called it the New Democratic Revolution. And that necessitates an alliance between the proletariat, the peasantry, and even the national bourgeoisie.
Basically playing to self-interest, at least with the national bourgeoisie, of like it's in your own best interest to free yourself from like the foreign bourgeoisie who is like above you in the pecking order.
Right. That's exactly what it is. And it's like a very slippery slope, as was experienced by the Chinese people under the leadership of the Kuomintang. It takes like a level of struggle and also a level of strategy that wasn't really outlined in the purely Marxist-Leninist revolutionary model. And so that was kind of where Mao had to come in and say, like, here are the strategic alliances that you will need to develop in order to successfully undertake the kind of revolution that can both push out the imperial power and also retain enough of the capital necessary to develop independently a system of capitalism from which you can then stage a socialist revolution and transition into communism.
Because you can't skip straight to dessert.
Right. You can't skip straight to dessert because if you try, you will have huge capital flight.
What happened to France in the 80s? The French left in 1981, finally won outright majority power in France. And a coalition government was formed between the French Communists and the French Socialist Party under President Francois Mitterrand. And he wanted to do all of these massive reforms to advance towards communism. And what happened was immediate, massive capital flight.
That's very interesting. The 80s was a fucking wild time. It was like a very bleak time for communism. You had Cambodia, you had Peru, you had France, you had the collapse of the USSR, you had fucking Dengist revisionism.
The French Communist Party never truly recovered from being in that coalition government that suffered the capital flight.
Right, and a lot of these other nations never recovered either. In fact, in Peru, the political power in Peru was basically kept afloat by fighting a war on terrorism as the terrorists in the war on terrorism were the fucking communists. So when this new democratic revolution is botched, it can go very badly. However, this dynamic is so complex and not something that you can really address with a typical Marxist-Leninist model.
Oh boy.
But that's also why, I don't consider myself to be simply a Marxist-Leninist or simply a Maoist. I think we need to be able to understand all of these moving parts to be able to have a more comprehensive idea of the role that the proletariat actually needs to play in these revolutions. And although, Mao recognizes that there needs to be kind of a cross-class alliance against the imperialists, the revolution itself needs to be undertaken by the proletariat through the Communist Party. Unless the capital is properly appropriated from the exploiting classes, meaning if you just leave it to some neoliberal dipshit to undertake this new democratic revolution,
they're just going to end up privatizing the welfare state.
Yeah, then you end up with a Fujimori dictatorship.
Or you end up with Bill Clinton.
I don't know how that works, actually, but you know what I'm saying. American leftists don't fucking understand. They don't think about this. They don't think about the process of first having to develop capitalism before you can even think about then undergoing the next stage of revolution. This is what we're dealing with when we talk about revolutions first have to kind of happen in the imperial periphery before we can do that here. And anytime we support the United States as an imperial power, we are making this process more difficult.
We're actually slowing down our own revolution from happening.
Exactly.
God, we're idiots.
Gotta hasten the revolution, folks.
We need to speed up the process of which our empire is dying in order to provoke the conditions necessary to foment revolution.
When we say, it's great, the United States is like an angel investor in the underdeveloped world, all we are doing is adding another layer of complexity and exploitation onto an already exploited, several classes of people.
Yeah.
So I think the most revolutionary thing we can do in the imperial core is prevent the imperial core from doing imperialism.
Yeah. Speak out against it. Damn it. All right, folks.
I actually found that to be a very thought-provoking and enlightening theory primer. I mean, I wasn't interjecting as much because I was actually listening and thinking about it.
Hell yeah, folks. That's what you need to do, is you need to sit with your thoughts, and get enough sleep, which I have clearly not been doing.
Definitely the sleep part.
Yeah.
Because I
Folks.
sure am not getting enough of that.
It's okay. I also take responsibility because I started out strong and then I stopped writing full sentences and then I had to parse my own writing.
Hey, you finished strong.
Yeah, you did
stuck
well.
the landing.
You did well.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah. God damn it. My name's Scott, Sweaty Wife. So I started streaming on Twitch. I announced that on our YouTube last night. Sweaty_wife, if you want to follow me on that. I'll make announcements about it more on my Instagram. Joe, what do you know?
I am Joe. I know many things. Lots of them involving baseball, which
Prove
will
that.
annoy the shit out of my co-host, but that's okay, because they already know what's coming.
Doug, I don't care.
Sorry.
And he's Jesse.
I'm Jesse. I wasn't paying attention. So
I actually clicked on the wrong one. I clicked on the longer one, which was actually perfect. So
that was a misfart.
I'm Jesse, and you can find my music at soundcloud.com/contingence_Boston, CONTINGENCE, Boston. And I have a slam recommendation. And last time I said that I had a Swedish one, and just to shit on the Swedes, I would not plug it. So I'm going to plug it this time, because I promise. An album entitled Your Very Topically recommendation is Empires of Great Enslavement. Band is Vomitus.
Are they from Sweden, you said?
Yeah.
Vomitus from Sweden. Alright.
They were actually a 6-piece.
What?
Yeah.
That's a lot of... That's a lot of three guitarists.
You don't see that often, a 6-piece fucking slam outfit.
That's a lot of members in a band. 6? Are they a ska band? What the fuck's going on? Anyways.
No. They're not.
Remember when there's ska core? Ska metal and shit? Crazy. I don't know why we
Green Day used to be ska.
Yeah, no, ska is cool.
Like their first LP was definitely ska. I don't know what the fuck happened, dude.
To what, ska? Or
no,
Green Day?
Like why? Yeah, like
they money? What do you want? I don't know.
Yeah,
their later albums are okay. Why are we talking about Green Day?
I guess Dookie was okay, even though there was no horns in it, but whatever.
Anyways, Jesus Christ, we say, but like, go get a tank, and like, go to the record store and be like, fucking restock all your original
albums.
Restock all your original copies of Kerplunk, you motherfuckers. Come on.
Get a tank, get a bunch of garbage, dump it on the front steps of whatever government body that exists near you.
Goodbye, but Longview is no.
I'm surprised you remember, like, because Kerplunk is precisely the album that I was thinking of. Dookie, right? I already said it.
No, yeah. But what's the Less Than Jake album I'm thinking of? Fucking Hello Rockview, yeah. Whenever I think of ska, Hello Rockview is what I think of.
I think of Real Big Fish because, like, I grew up with this kid who is a jam band fanatic, and his he had an impression of Real Big Fish, but he only did it once, and he stopped because everybody started laughing. But all he could get out was
it perfect?
Do. So that's like all I think of now.
Doodle 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 doodle. Sell out. Oh, with me. Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, dude.
The record company's gonna give me lots of money, and everything's gonna
be. That's the Epoch, you fucks. was a moment at work today where like I'm kind of semi-training one of my coworkers like how to work on like bar, and like they did some basically they like dropped a drink in the sink as they were trying to like fill it up with like hot water. They were like making an Americano, and I go, it's fine, it happens to the best of us, but it hasn't happened to me. Yeah, I know.